We have a real problem with the storm, and the aftermath of the storm is the authority.
For more than 30 years, Eustace Conway lived in a way that most people only imagine, far away from city life, living directly from the land and depending on nature. His home, Turtle Island Preserve in North Carolina, became known as a place that taught old traditional skills and natural living. People traveled there to learn how to work with the land and live simply. As his popularity grew because of the Mountain Men show and public interest, so did the attention he received from government officials. The more visitors came, the more the government watched. What followed was pressure from authorities, surprise visits, and accusations that his buildings and lifestyle did not follow state codes. This led to a long struggle with laws that nearly destroyed everything he had worked so hard to build. Before any fame, before television, and before thousands of visitors, Eustace was already living this life. He was born in 1961 in Columbia, South Carolina. His childhood was not ordinary. His father was strict and believed that difficulty made a person strong. Eustace grew up spending most of his time outdoors. He slept outside at night in shelters he made himself. He wore clothes made from animal skins instead of store-bought jackets. His food came from the land rather than grocery stores. While other children feared the forest, he studied it. He learned to be part of it. By age 12, he could identify many trees just by the texture of their bark. At 14, he hunted and killed his first deer using a bow he made with his own hands. He learned to prepare hides, sew moccasins, and build shelters out of wood. He filled notebooks with drawings of tools, shelter designs, fire-making methods, and cabin-building ideas. His father did not praise or encourage him. Instead, he pushed him harder, always expecting more. This shaped Eustace deeply. He learned to improve himself silently. He believed that growth came from challenge and discomfort, not ease and comfort. To Eustace, school felt like a trap. He struggled to sit still indoors. He did well academically, but his mind was always outside. He was not rebellious. He simply felt that he did not belong in a classroom. The world outside felt alive. He believed nature was the real teacher. His classmates studied math and science, while he studied edible plants, animal tracks, and bird behavior. Teachers described him as intelligent but distant. He learned things that could not be measured by tests. By the time he became a teenager, his outdoor skills were already far beyond what most adults could do. He traveled long distances on horseback. He paddled rivers for weeks without returning home. He lived with almost nothing, depending only on what the land provided. To him, this was not an adventure. It was preparation. He believed the world was becoming soft and dependent. He believed people were forgetting skills humans once needed to survive. He felt he had to keep these skills alive. His father's strictness also left him with a strong desire for independence. If authority meant restriction, then freedom meant distance from it. While other teenagers looked for parties and crowds, Eustace looked for silence in the forest. The woods, unlike people, never judged him. They simply existed. By adulthood, he knew exactly what he wanted: a life built away from modern society, a life based on the old ways. He wanted a place where he could live fully independent and where others could come to learn how to live as humans once lived before modern technology. This idea eventually grew into Turtle Island. By the early 1980s, he had already traveled more wilderness miles than most park workers will in their entire careers. But traveling was not enough. He realized that adventure by itself did not preserve ancient skills. To keep knowledge alive, he had to teach others. He began searching for land in the Appalachian Mountains. He wanted a place hidden, peaceful, and untouched. He studied the hills, the way the land held water, the direction of the wind, the patterns of wildlife. Eventually, he found a piece of land in Boone, North Carolina. It was quiet, steep, and filled with forests and streams. It looked like a place forgotten by time. He purchased the land in 1987. He did not hire builders. He did not use machines. He built everything by hand. Cabins, sheds, workshops, barns, all made from logs, stones, and wood he collected from the land. The buildings carried his fingerprints. not factory labels. People began to hear about this place. Scouts, hikers, and school groups visited. Children learned how to tan hides, start fires without matches, track animals, and cook food over open flames. Parents watched their children become stronger, more confident, and more capable. Turtle Island grew. More land was added until the preserve reached about 1,000 acres. It was not a tourist attraction. It was a living school. Students learned how to forge metal, ride horses, purify water from natural sources, and use limited resources. Eustace believed struggle created strength. People left Turtle Island with dirt on their hands and newfound pride in themselves. But growth brought problems. More cars came through the narrow mountain roads, more smoke rose from fires, more noise spread through the valley. Some neighbors were curious, others were annoyed. One neighbor disliked the smoke. Another complained about people passing near private land. Even though Turtle Island remained peaceful, the complaints began to gather. County officials noticed the increased activity. They began to question Turtle Island. They wondered if it was a school, a camp, a business, or something else. It was all of those, and none of those. For nearly 20 years, Turtle Island functioned quietly, like an old-style village hidden in modern America. But when television brought attention, everything changed. What was invisible became visible, and what becomes visible becomes regulated. Bureaucracy cannot ignore what it notices, and the fight that nearly destroyed Turtle Island was beginning. As more visitors came to Turtle Island, county departments began looking closer. They reviewed activities, buildings, and programs. They saw children sleeping in cabins, groups eating meals outdoors, tools being used, and classes being taught. None of it fit into any simple category. It was not a campground, not a school, not a youth camp, not a commercial business, not a residential neighborhood. Because it did not fit a box, it made officials uncomfortable. They decided to inspect the land and the buildings. When they arrived, they did not look at how well the buildings were made by skill or experience. They looked only to see whether the buildings matched modern code requirements. Cabins built with thick, hand-cut logs were considered unsafe, simply because they did not carry factory lumber stamps. Stairs built with careful craftsmanship were considered wrong because they did not meet specific measurements. Outdoor kitchens, which had been used safely for decades, were suddenly a problem because food service rules required commercial equipment. Composting toilets, which environmental experts praised for sustainability, were questioned because they did not match the plumbing rules written for neighborhoods with running water. None of this meant Turtle Island was dangerous. It meant it was different. The government system did not know how to handle something that did not match modern standards. And instead of adjusting rules to understand difference, they demanded that Eustace change his way of living. Complaints from neighbors continued. Smoke from fires, visitors walking near property lines, cars on narrow roads. These small concerns slowly built a legal record. Once enough complaints were collected on paper, enforcement became required. Over time, Turtle Island was no longer seen as a quiet, traditional school, but as something that needed control. In late 2012, county officials returned with formal lists of violations. Eustace believed that cooperation and honesty would clear misunderstandings. But inspectors did not evaluate his lifestyle based on safety. They evaluated it based on government paperwork. They noted missing stamped lumber, missing sprinkler systems, missing emergency lighting, missing modern railings. They noted that outdoor cooking areas did not meet restaurant regulations. They noted that group sleeping quarters required lodging certification. They wrote down every detail and marked it as a legal failure. Days later, an official order arrived stating that Turtle Island must immediately stop all educational programs until every building met full modern building and safety codes. Overnight, everything stopped. Students were turned away. Workshops were canceled. Families were confused. Volunteers felt helpless. The preserve, which had always felt alive, suddenly became silent and still. News spread quickly. Officials said the issue was safety and liability. Supporters said the government was attacking a way of life. People who had visited Turtle Island shared memories of learning hard work, patience, and confidence. They said the cabins were strong and safe. They said the outdoor cooking was clean and healthy. They argued that the point of Turtle Island was to teach life before industrial convenience. But opponents said rules were rules. They said any place hosting children needed inspections. They talked about fire risks, emergency access, and sanitation. Television reporters arrived. Interviews aired. The public debate grew louder. It was no longer about logs and kitchens. It was about whether old ways of living were allowed to exist inside modern America. County officials proposed solutions, but their solutions required replacing the identity of Turtle Island. They wanted drywall, factory-cut lumber, sprinkler systems, treated staircases, and metal fixtures. They wanted the buildings to look like every modern building. But if these changes were done, Turtle Island would no longer be a place that taught primitive skills. It would become the same as the modern world Eustace had worked to escape. Eustace explained that survival skills cannot be taught in artificial conditions. You cannot understand hand-built craftsmanship if every structure is remade to look like a suburb. The conflict moved into court. Lawyers, judges, county officials, and insurance companies debated over definitions and categories. The law had no space for something like Turtle Island. If people slept in a structure, it was treated like a lodging business. If food was served, it was treated like a commercial kitchen. If children were taught, it was treated like a school. It did not matter that the entire purpose was to demonstrate older ways of living. The law only recognized modern forms. Witnesses spoke on both sides. Students and parents talked about the positive changes the preserve created. Fire safety officials talked about emergency response times. Insurance companies talked about liability. The courtroom could not measure the strength of hand-hewn logs. It could only measure compliance with printed standards. Each day of legal discussion made clear that the problem was not danger. The problem was that the law did not know how to handle a lifestyle older than itself. The judge could only interpret the code, and the code did not allow exceptions for tradition. Then something unexpected happened. The public pressure reached state lawmakers. They realized this situation was larger than land disputes or inspections. It was about whether traditional craftsmanship and primitive living could legally exist in the modern world. They drafted a new law, House Bill 774, which created exceptions for primitive educational preserves. This meant Turtle Island could continue to operate without replacing its structures or abandoning its traditional methods. The bill passed. Turtle Island reopened. The fires returned. The classrooms under open sky returned. The way of life continued. The victory did not remove challenges. It simply allowed the preserve to breathe again. Regulations still changed year to year. Insurance costs increased. Property taxes rose. More visitors meant more risk of incident reports. The legal pressure never fully disappeared. But Eustace did not let this weaken his mission. He continued teaching. He continued working with his hands. He continued passing down knowledge that would otherwise disappear. He believed that learning how to live with the land was not a hobby. It was something essential. He grew older. His body carried decades of labor. He wondered who would continue the work after him. Teaching skills is one thing. Carrying responsibility for the land is another. Turtle Island's survival depended on someone who understood the meaning of the place, not just its tools. Still, the preserve stood. Children continued to arrive and leave stronger than they came. Parents continued to thank him, and the land continued to hold knowledge for anyone willing to learn. The legal system had allowed Turtle Island to exist, but it did not protect it. The only thing that protected Turtle Island was Eustace's determination. He understood that freedom is not something given permanently. It is something defended continuously. And as long as there is firewood stacked, shelters standing, and the sound of tools on timber, the old ways are still alive. The land remains teaching, the forest remains guiding, and Turtle Island remains a reminder that real knowledge is learned through effort, not convenience.